And if so, at what point during the time between 12 noon and the moment the booze ran out would the guests be sitting down to it? The whole thing made Carole Seddon very nervous. She couldn't imagine a less appealing concept than that of an open house. Houses like High Tor should, in her opinion, be permanently closed, with invited guests arriving by pre-arrangement only. If people started coming to your house any time they felt like it, the potential for embarrassment was unimaginable. Amidst all her agonizing about the invitation, Carole wouldn't admit to herself what was really worrying her. It was meeting Jude's other friends. Her neighbour was currently working as a healer, a word from whose pronunciation Carole could never exclude an edge of scepticism, but it was clear that, before she moved to the middle-class gentility of Fethering, Jude had had an extremely varied and colourful life. Carole had never quite got all the details of this life, just hints from things mentioned in passing. This was not because Jude was secretive. She was the most open of women, but because Carole always felt reticent about probing too overtly. This did not mean that she was not intrigued by her friend's past, and she had pieced together quite a few gobbets of information about it. At various stages of her life, Jude had been a model, an actress, and a restaurateur. She had been married at least twice, cohabited with other men, and had a stream of lovers, more numerous in Carole's imagination than they could ever have been in reality. But whenever Carole got to the point of asking for more flesh to be put on this skeletal history, the conversation seemed invariably to glide on to other subjects. Jude was not being deliberately evasive. She was such an empathetic listener that people, even self-contained people like Carole, soon found themselves talking about their own lives and problems rather than hers. But the thought of Jude's friends was worrying. The thought of the other guests who might attend the Christmas open house. It wasn't that Carole had never met any of Jude's friends. The people who used her healing services often became more than clients, and Carole had been introduced to some of them. She had even met one of Jude's lovers, Lawrence Hawker, who had lived out the last months of his life at Woodside Cottage. But Carole was worried about the ones she hadn't met, worried about the kind of people they might be, positive, relaxed people like Jude herself, people for whom being alive seemed part of a natural process rather than, as it often felt to Carole, a challenging imposition. People who would think that Jude's neighbour was irredeemably dowdy, with her antiseptically tidy house, her pension from the Home Office, her Marks and Spencer's clothes, her sensible shoes, her straight-cut grey hair and rimless glasses over pale blue eyes. Carole Seddon knew that she could never compete with the faint aura of glamour which always hung about Jude. With that perverse vanity of the shy, she was much more worried about what people might think of her than she was inclined to show any interest in them. The other thing that worried her was that one of Jude's friends at the open house might ask how she usually spent Christmas, or worse, might find out how she actually had spent the last few Christmases. In her bleakest moments, Carole thought her ideal would be never to prompt any emotion from anyone. But now her granddaughter Lily was in her life. This was becoming a difficult stance to maintain. There was one emotion, however, which Carole Seddon never wanted to promote in anyone, and that was pity. When she had moved permanently to Fethering, raw from her divorce and smarting from her not completely voluntary early retirement from the Home Office, she had known the risks of appearing pitiable. A woman the wrong side of the menopause, on her own in a seaside village, she was morbidly afraid of slipping into the stereotype of the solitary, swaddled figure reading a magazine in a shelter by the beach. It was to counter this danger that she had bought a dog. Gulliver was a Labrador, and his original purpose had been to stop Carole from looking as if she was alone when she went for walks on Fethering Beach. She couldn't be seen to be walking because she had nothing else to do. She was walking to exercise Gulliver. No one could pity her for that. They could pity her, though, if they knew that she had spent the last